there! Welcome to Pallet University. So, last week we announced a brand new series on the channel in which we give every Pokemon a scientific name. Last week was just the intro, however, and today we actually get into the weeds and start assigning some names. First, just some quick reminders about some of the rules. Firstly, all the names will be in either Greek or Latin depending on the circumstance. We'll only be giving names to the final evolution in an evolutionary line, similar to how, a caterpillar and a butterfly of the same species have the same name. So you don't name, the caterpillar one scientific name, and then the butterfly that it turns into a different scientific name. They're the same animal. For example, we will be giving Bulbasaur, Ivysaur, and Venusaur all one name. And also, I don't know Latin or Greek myself, so if you do, please give me a little leeway on some of the grammar. And also, it's important to note that when I say scientific name, I'm meaning the genus and species of each of these Pokemon. With that out of the way, let's get started with the first Pokemon in the Pokedex, or the first family, I should say, Venusaur. I gave Venusaur the name Glaucocrescus cytophilus, which means glowing blue-green leaf. And I thought it was really important to not, call Venusaur something that ends in the word saurus, like you hear with a lot of dinosaurs like Tyrannosaurus, because that is used almost exclusively for reptiles. There's a couple exceptions for things, like there's a species of prehistoric whale whose name is Basilosaurus, but when they found it, they thought it was a reptile, which is why they gave it that name. But as we talked about in this video, the first video on the channel, Venusaur is not a dinosaur, it is not a reptile, it is a synapsid. So I thought it was very important to not have it have a name that had the word saurus in it, which means lizard. Next up we have an actual reptile, Charizard, whose name is Pseudodraco caustus. This means burnt fake dragon, and I think this one's pretty obvious for Charizard, as it's a dragon, but it's like not really, it's a fake dragon, but instead of having a dragon typing, it has the fire typing instead. Wrapping up the Gen 1 starters, we have Blastoise, or Gigachellus elytris. This means giant sheathed turtle. Many turtles in the real world have the word chellus in their scientific name. I may be mispronouncing that, by the way. But they have this in their name because it's the Greek word for a musical instrument that most people know as a lyre. And the reason that this is commonly used in their names is that because back in the day, lyres used to be made using tortoise shells. So, a little bit of history there. Moving away from the starters, we have Butterfree, or Orbophacus hesperidus. This means circle-lensed evening. And this is sort of a reference to Butterfree having the hidden ability Tinted Lens, as well as sort of its theorized relationship with Venomoth, which we will get to probably next episode. Right next to Butterfree, we have Beedrill, or Terebrovespus. This literally means drill wasp, and it doesn't really get much more self-explanatory than that. It's basically just Beedrill's name in Latin. Next up, we have probably my favorite one of this episode, which is for Pidgeot. Due to its common nickname of Bird Jesus, Pidgeot's scientific name is Messias avum, or Messiah Bird. So now we come up on the first Pokemon that has an Alolan form, which is Raticate. I gave Raticate the name Magmus copiosus, or Large Abundant Mouse. This one's kind of neat because the genus name Magmus is sort of a combination of two words, the first being Magnus, which means large, and Mus, which is the genus name of your generic house mice. Copiosus, which means abundant, is a reference to Rattata being annoyingly common on the routes where it's found. In addition to normal Raticate, we also have to talk about Alolan Raticate. Being that Alolan forms have the same Pokedex number as their non-Alolan forms, we have to kind of assume that they're the same species. So instead of, giving them two separate names, or maybe just giving them the same genus and a different species, I decided to make all Alolan forms subspecies of the same species. So just to keep Raticate simple, Alolan Raticate is Magmus copiosus alolis, and Cantonian Raticate is Magmus copiosus cantonia. Up next we have the second of the seemingly endless list of normal flying type bird Pokemon, Fearow. Fearow's scientific name is Timoravis terebris. This name means drilling bird of fear, and is a reference to both its name in English and in Japanese. Its Japanese name is Onidrill, and I don't want to pretend to do a Japanese accent because I know I'm just going to butcher it, But Onidrill comes from Oni, which is the Japanese word for demon, and the English word drill. So having drill in there as well as fear bird kind of made sense. Next up we have Arbok, and Arbok really made me think. Although it doesn't have regional variants like Alolan forms, Arbok has different patterns on its hood in several different generations. So it made me think, do I give each one of those a subspecies? How do I handle that? And the Pokédex even states that there are over 20 different hood patterns in various regions. I decided not to give them different subspecies because in my mind it's really no different than people having like different hair color based on where they're from. Like somebody from like the northern UK, like Scotland and Ireland, having red hair as opposed to me having brown hair. Like they just have red hair because that's where their ancestry is, that's just their genetics. So I decided to just give all Arbok one species name. But in honor of all the regional patterns that Arbok has, I gave it the name Cocolubris tellus, which means regional hooded snake. And now we move up to the icon of the whole franchise, or, well, it's evolution anyway, Raichu and Alolan Raichu. Raichu has the name Tonitrum Iconum, and this means iconic thunder, which is obviously a reference to Pikachu being the icon of the whole franchise, and thunder because they are electric types. As with Raticate and Alolan Raticate, Raichu and Alolan Raichu are different subspecies of Tonitrum Iconum. Cantonian Raichu has the name Tonitrum Iconum terrace because it's on the ground, and Alolan Raichu has the name Tonitrum Iconum levator because it floats in the air. Next we have another Pokemon with an Alolan form, Sandslash. Sandshrew and Sandslash are based on a real-life animal called the pangolin, which is an animal that's somewhat closely related to the anteater, and I wanted its scientific name to reflect that. So the name that I gave Sandslash is Manidinus gigunguus. It's kind of a mouthful, but it means giant clawed pangolin. Manid in the genus name comes from the family that all pangolins belong to, Manidae. Alolan Sandslash has the name Manidinus gigunguus gallus, or Gellus, depending on how you want to pronounce that G, with Gallus meaning ice, and Cantonian Sandslash has the name Manidinus gigunguus mundus, which means earth. Next up we have a really interesting case, which is the Nidoran line. And yes, I said line as in singular, because they're all really the same Pokemon. The only reason that Nidoran male and Nidoran female are different is because back in Gen 1, that was the only way for them to denote one being male and one being female. Pokemon did not plan for anything after Generation 1. They did not expect Pokemon to do as well as it did. So they didn't really anticipate, a gender mechanic coming in later in the franchise. So because of that, they made Nidoran male and Nidoran female. But, if they were made in later generations, they would just be, something like Meowstic, where the male and female do completely different things. And evidence for this is that Nidoran female can produce eggs that hatch into either Nidoran male or Nidoran female. So because of that, I think they're the same species. So because of that, Nidoran male, Nidoran female, Nidorino, Nidorina, Nidoking, and Nidoqueen all have the scientific name Polygenus tuxicanus. This name means multi-gendered poison arrow. The multi-gendered part is pretty self-explanatory, while the poison arrow part comes from their ability Poison Point. Clefable is next on the list, and its name is honestly really simple just because I couldn't really think of anything else. Anyway, its name is Lunaris fabula, which means moon myth. Pretty self-explanatory as well. Next up we have another Pokemon with an Alolan form, which is Ninetales. I considered giving Ninetales kind of like a meme name with something with Mozilla in it because of the browser Firefox. Mozilla is the company or whatever Mozilla is that produces Firefox. But Ninetales just has so much cool lore around it that I wanted to have the name reflect that instead. The name I chose for Ninetales was Imprecatius Milanus. This means 1,000-year curse, and this is pretty well known if you know anything, if you've read any of Ninetales Pokédex entries. There's a well-known legend that if you grab one of Ninetales' tails, it will put a 1,000-year curse on you. So I feel like that's pretty self-explanatory if you know a little bit of the lore of Ninetales. Like Alolan Sandslash, Alolan Ninetales adds Gallus to the name, making it Imprecatius Milanus Gallus, while Cantonian Ninetales has the subspecies name similar to Charizard's name, which is Imprecatius Milanus Costus, which means burnt. Lastly, for this episode, we have Wigglytuff, which is Globulus lepus, or round rabbit. hopefully that one should be pretty self-explanatory as well. Wigglytuff, I think, is a rabbit. I think most people kind of agree on that. And it's a balloon, so round. So that's 15 down and roughly 400 to go. Most episodes should have between 12 and 15 different Pokemon named in it, so that should work out to about 30 more episodes of this series, coming at you every Wednesday from here on out. If you're excited to learn more Pokemon scientific names, definitely feel free to subscribe. Follow us on Twitter at Pallet_U as well. Keeping out this coming Wednesday for the next episode of this series, as well as this coming weekend when we get back to our regularly scheduled programming of Pokemon science, Pokemon theories, and miscellaneous other fun Pokemon topics that I want to cover. And as always, there's a time and place for everything.